there's more to fitness than six packs. With Fitness and Thinking, we're looking at 6 pillars of fitness: the physical, mental, social, spiritual, emotional, and financial states of being. And I think in this discussion we got into...
The financial side.
It's all financial. Yeah, we're not getting onto that anytime soon. I've not figured out necessarily the guest for it yet, but if you have an idea, if you'd like me to chat to you about it, then do let me know. In what we've just gone through, Logan, what do you think stood out for you?
Well, I really liked your description of your usage of the metaphor of the rainbow. That really stayed with me.
That's good.
So you've invoked it a few times at the start, where, if the point of impact is a site of disaster, so is the point of departure, as it were. And then at the end, when you're talking about the rocket has already landed, which is kind of also what Pynchon is doing in Gravity's Rainbow, like the fact that the rocket lands at the end of the book with this dash that interrupts and ends, as it were, the narrative, but it means you start again. You start the book again. Yeah.
And we talk about 2 of your books, so In Rocket States and the...
Insect book.
I didn't want to just call it that, but the
insect book.
Which we can get for free from Routledge.
Yes, exactly.
And I think touching on Arnie and how he represents the human, transhuman, what comes next, and what we won't allow to happen in society at the same time.
Yeah, and we talked a bit about swimming as well, which we've talked about less than I thought we would.
But there was a lovely reading from one of your manuscripts.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Right.
Amazing.
Stay tuned.
Let's start right here. To be human.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a myth.
Go on.
Well, I think it's a myth that we tell ourselves to create binaries between ourselves and the natural and animal world. And I think it's a fantasy of the human subject. Because, if we look at, so in that book, the insect book, that I looked at the psychoanalytic archive, Freud and Lacan, and looked at how they describe the formation of the subject. And there's one particular book by Lacan, Seminar, actually I don't remember, Seminar 20, Anxiety it's called. And on the cover you've got a picture of MC Escher's, like,
staircases.
No, not the staircases, but the infinity loop crawling with ants.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I look at that, and it's about, basically I think that the articulation of the human from the start is sort of beset by these parasitic glitches, so that it's never a sort of stable formation.
So is that an issue with classification, or is it just that there are so many things living inside us that we can't all be one thing?
Yeah. Both. So I just learned this new term, which I've already forgotten. It's a bit like bionic, but holobiontic. Have you heard of this? Holobiontic. So that's a thing that's like apparently scientists are concerned with now. So it's not just all the little organisms that we support on our skin or in our hair or whatever, but also inside. So holobiontic is a new thing. I just learned about it in the supervision I just had. So that's become a new thing, and so it's scientists who are in some way catching up to what literary theorists have been saying for decades, in a sense, so that the human is not some sort of stable, separate organism at all.
I've been reading a lot to get to this conversation. How did you arrive at what you research? Like, where did this interest for you in the human and non-human start, Logan?
Well, I think it started with Thomas Pynchon back when I was doing an undergrad, and I was just interested in weapon systems and their occupation of the land, but also of mines. And I got really into this theorist called Paul Virilio, who wrote a lot about war, this idea of pure war, and being colonized by machine or machine thinking. And then it just goes kind of further back or forward, just reading all sorts of other theorists about cyborgic organisms. Derrida as well, saying that even like, where do we start? What is a technology? Is language a technology? Is our hand a technology? Because hands use tools, so where do we delimit where a technology starts and where the body ends? And there is no clear delimitation. That's kind of how I got into the whole subject.
We were just chatting with your colleague Adam Piet on another poet, another writer who uses machines through language to shape and control kind of output and story. So the idea that a poem or a line of code could lead to something is really interesting. Yeah, and in Rocket States, I think your 2014 book, you talk about the virality of ideas and words, and that if you can, like the ideas of control, and the body is one thing that you can control, but also within the body and around it. I think specifically for this conversation, you're interested in Freud, Arnie,
Yes.
and post-human. So if we have these as three central ideas, that's probably helpful. I picked your book up and it was opposite Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
Oh wow, cool.
And
that's good company to have.
It's incredible company to have. One of the first essays I remember writing and enjoying and thinking, wow, was on Invisible Man. It was a close reading, and it was this idea of being invisible in society, but completely seen in literature, completely seen in expression and words, and that this is infectious almost, that you could take over through discourse, through writing. And it lit up my ways of thinking and neural pathways and all of that. And so to pick up your book, to then have this conversation, that was a nice link.
Yeah.
In your book, you often talk about the almost orgasmic approach to annihilation. And if we think about particularly the nuclear bomb, and this big build-up and explosion and release, and we are drawn to it. There's this constant drive towards death and repetition. If we think of The Last of Us and Fallout, all of these post-apocalyptic stories that are in the media, that are games and they're books, and you had Metro 2033 before that, which became a game. It was a Russian novel that was translated. The excitement for it, Threads based in Sheffield, all about what comes after. And what comes after is always triggered by us. Why are we so drawn to death? Why are we building it? Why are we excited about narratives on it? What do you think has brought us to this point?
I mean, I think Freud.
It's all Freud.
It's all Freud.
Yeah.
It's all Freud.
If it's not one thing, it's your mother.
It's just exactly. And I just think, like, even, I mean, in terms of the rocket states thing, I mean, it's an easy thing to comment on when you're thinking about rockets, which is the sort of symbolic dimensions of these weapons, which I've never really touched on very much. But like, obviously, films like Dr. Strangelove do that, and they tap into that kind of orgiastic discourse as well, which Jack the Ripper, no, not Jack the Ripper, Colonel Ripper, whatever his name is, the one who actually unleashes the bomb, who goes rogue.
The one who rides the rocket.
Yeah, the one. Is that Ripper? Or is that Buck Turgidson? I don't remember.
I've only seen it once.
Oh God, I've seen it so many times, but I don't remember. We need to get Adam to talk about that. But that kind of narrative is all in there, of course, and like about the precious bodily fluids which need to be contained, etc. And at the same time, there's this kind of release. But I mean, in terms of like I mean, I think that the death drive is pretty central to all of this, and I think it's. I mean, Freud was really disturbed by it, and he didn't really notice that it was, a thing that was happening, because he only talks about it in Beyond the Pleasure Principle in more detail, and he kind of says there that like the sex drive is really loud and clamoring, and we're aware of it, but like the death drive is this sort of silent and mute force that's relentlessly at work, but without us necessarily noticing. That is the sort of drive to want to return to an inorganic state of things. And he links it to the pleasure principle in a sense that like the psyche wants to eliminate unpleasure, so it's to be sort of homeostatic, to have like no kind of disturbances, or as little disturbance as possible. And that the death drive goes beyond that kind of wish to like be totally inanimate. So I just think that's just it is a disturbing idea, but it's also really compelling, I think.
It feels to me that by building weapons, by building these tools of destruction, like we are determined to blow ourselves up. It's not about defense or attack necessarily. If you launch a rocket, like my brain really is spinning, so stop me if it's too excitable. But Gravity's Rainbow, the Pynchon novel, is the idea of from where the rocket is launched to where it lands. And obviously where it lands is in big trouble. But if we think about mutually assured destruction, then where it came from is in big trouble as well. And for everybody living underneath the rainbow, it's not particularly pretty.
No.
But this construction of the thing you know, whether it results in a half-life, you know, kind of seeping radiation and killing everything around it, or no life. You know, death is guaranteed as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Freudian bit of driving towards that, of becoming, is it becoming dead? Is it still alive while not feeling? What is it?
I think it's to be free from desire. Like, because desire is that which agitates and which puts the psyche into like overdrive. So like to be free from all of that, to be free from desire is when
you're thinking about the song. Aren't you?
Yes. So is when you're like, when you've reached that point of like complete like quietude.
Is that a post-orgasmic thing? Is that a satisfaction
Yes,
thing?
yeah, it is in a sense, that kind of state. But obviously it's only ever temporary.
Okay.
But I think that's also what the death drive is, to not feel any desire. And I guess that means like to be without life.
Is that building on, was it Schopenhauer who describes happiness as not sad?
I don't know.
So reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about his desire while he's in the camp to not think of happiness as not being in pain or not being scared, or, you know, that there was a way for, I think it was 19th century philosophers to describe happiness as a state of like opposing a contra negative feeling rather than just happiness, rather than just joy. And Frankl's aim was to feel joy rather than a not sadness.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that aligns kind of with what Freud says, because like the psyche is striving for avoiding unpleasure. So that doesn't necessarily say we're going to go out and seek pleasure, because pleasure brings with it its own upset of the organism, if you will. Thinking about swimming, because that's my activity, and I was just thinking that brings equilibrium with it. I mean, quite literally, because you have to keep a sort of like balance in the water. Like, you can't let your legs drift too far down, because otherwise it will, like, you'll have to struggle a lot more in the water than if you just like you try and be as horizontal as possible. But it's like, and I was just thinking about like one of the things that I really like about swimming is that it sort of empties it empties the sort of self, and it empties the brain, other than like the movement that you're doing, you know, to keep afloat. Not even afloat, because like you're floating, but like to keep like swimming, really.
Yeah, there's always tension, isn't there?
There's always tension, yeah. But at the same time, like sometimes I feel like it doesn't always happen, but like, or not quite, like not consistently, but sometimes you feel like, yeah, I'm really moving through this like a mean machine. You know, when you really feel that you're, okay, so I think this stroke, I've nailed that. But then like the next stroke might be like oh, I'm just kind of flailing again. But I think, yeah, it's that kind of weird, in that sense, sort of pursuit of like a sort of ideal emptiness. And maybe that's also just like what Freud is talking about. I don't know.
Anything that allows for repetition, and we're talking about repetition and death as part of what Freud was interested in, and we are drawn to it. It's something that is easy to fall into. And part of flow state typically is repeating the same act and having that perfect pitch of stress, confidence, anxiety, no anxiety. It's everything and nothing at the same time, so that you don't think it, you just feel it. You just are swimming. You just are returning a serve. You just are scoring the match-winning goal. You know, it's a wonderful place to be in, and it necessarily comes from a point of tension and no tension. And with something like swimming, where you would benefit from repeated actions, otherwise you sink potentially. I don't float unless I took my legs right underneath my body. Then yeah, every single movement is an opportunity to practice, which is wonderful. I think it's why I'm drawn to the gym, because you have sets, you have these blocks of repeated movements, and if one movement doesn't go well, okay, provided you've not hurt yourself, you know, maybe you can do another 5 more in that set. And if you train like me, maybe you do 2 sets of 6 to 10 reps, and that's it. You've got 2 really good opportunities to really work on your technique, and the satisfaction that you get at the end of it is fantastic. And I really like training in that way, rather than say 4 sets of 15 or 20 or whatever, because you really have to focus on those reps. And typically by the 2nd set, and maybe by the 4th, 5th, 6th reps, you just feel like you've got it. And that's amazing. And then you can leave it boxed off, go on to the next thing. Do you think that's maybe what it is with swimming for you?
I don't know. I think it's a good question. So some of the questions that you provided, I thought about them. It was something like what makes you get up in the morning, and it's just, well, I go for a swim, and it's like this. It's become, so I go first thing in the morning. I have a banana before, but that's it, and then I go first thing, and it's become this automatic thing. Even if I don't even have time to think, oh, I'm not in the mood now, or like it's too cold, or no, I'm too tired. That doesn't even come into my mind, because it's just become such an automatic thing that I do, and living so close to the pool is kind of part of it, because it really takes very little effort. And then once I'm there, I know that I come out and I just feel like this is great. I can now handle the day in whatever shape or form it might arrive at me. So I just think like that idea of like fitness and swimming to me is to like be mindful about my mental health, and to just be, it makes me less neurotic, I think.
Something that you touched on there I think is massive, is that typically to look after our mental health, to improve it, to preserve it, we need to move. And it's in non-thinking that we typically have better mental health.
Yeah.
And so what you've got there is a routine where you don't have to think.
Yeah.
You follow the routine, and as a result you feel better for it. And something that I've struggled with as a coach is encouraging people to develop routine. I think a lot of people think routine boring. And it's the same with meal prep. I've been chatting with a couple of chefs recently, and typically people who are in shape will have at least one meal a day, but it's often 2, maybe 3 that they planned. They know what they're going to eat ahead of time. And of course, Arnold was the king of that. He would have his set meals, and it doesn't necessarily have to be chicken and rice, but it will be a carb source, it will be a protein source, and it will probably be at a certain time of day. And he also smoked and had a beer from time to time. It's not like he was completely
total, yeah.
So I think that routine is huge, but it's automatic action. It's repeated action will mean that you become better at a thing. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I've been writing a book about, it's a critical creative piece about difficult family situation, and I talk a bit about swimming in there. And I don't know if it's the time to kind of just read a paragraph,
of course,
and see what we can make of that.
Yeah.
In sport, you stop being and become pure movement. Perhaps that erosion of the subject, ceding ground to unthinking motion, is what makes you less neurotic and emotionally more stable. You're approximating what Deleuze and Guattari call the minimal subject, a less cramped organism, a loosening of your armour rings, gaining a non-subject-based confidence in momentum. The minute I think about the process underwater, I lose momentum, the rhythm of swimming. I forget even that I can't breathe underwater, or that I've just taken a breath. Snapping out of the process is disorienting, suddenly there, in the middle of the lane, back in your interrupted organism. It's the process itself that gives confidence, gliding through the water, even if, at the start, it feels like you're thrashing around, that there's a world of difference between above and below the horizon.
That's great. Amazing. What's that from?
So that's from a case study of a partially dead object, as I've named this piece, which is still sort of looking for a home. But then also, the next paragraph then begins with, I get tired and make mistakes. There are always adjustments to make, like in terms of pace, go slow and steady, or the legs that are not beating from the hips, or the head that raises itself too far out of the water, or the arms that are not stretching out far enough. But these adjustments do not feel like failures or shortcomings. They feel like favourable ego alterations, at once feeding narcissistic structures, becoming less neurotic, increasing faith in your abilities, i.e. ego strengthening, and ego reducing. So it's like this kind of curious opposition, this paradoxical opposition as well, that I find interesting. Like between, like in school when we learned swimming, I hated it. We had this like sadistic PE coach, PE teacher, and I think they're always sadistic. That's what somebody told me when I told them the story. And I would hate to go swimming, and I could not front crawl for the life of me. And she would haul you out of water and just place you on this like mat and just rip your arms around. And I was just like, oh my God. And then I just got into swimming just about maybe 5-6 years ago, and I did a class on how to front crawl. And it was a totally different thing, and maybe that fits into it as well, because like it was an activity that I hated doing as a child, that I felt like I couldn't do, and now I feel like I'm getting proficient in it. And so it feels like, in that sense, it feels like it's giving you a boost, physically, but also mentally. And it's just this kind of nice sensation at the same time of like, that unthinking motion.
And I think with something like swimming, you benefit from reaching, don't you? There's that very physical feeling of a stretch from your fingertip all the way through to your hips.
Yeah.
And then if you're pointing your toes as well, you're making yourself as long as possible. Yeah. And you're thinking about, how can I most effectively move through this medium? Like, it's a wonderful metaphor for life if we allow it. And constantly reaching. And the next stroke is going to hopefully get us closer to where we want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that thing again of reps, it's every movement is an opportunity to improve, to get closer.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be.
To be or not to be. God.
Each episode of F&T takes about 10 hours to put together from start to finish. So if you could give me a second, maybe 2 seconds of your time to drop a like, subscribe, follow, and maybe even 5 seconds to leave a nice comment or a 5-star review, that would be incredible. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I'll see you in about 3 seconds. With Arnie. I think specifically Arnie, while he's here, Chekhov's gun, he had to go off at some point. Why are you drawn to him? And I think we can ask Freudian questions from there, if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that I got interested in Arnold because of a PhD colleague of mine, Warren Steele, who was at Glasgow as well. And his thesis was on the cyborg. So he was like a year or maybe 2 ahead of me. And he was writing about the Terminator, obviously as one of the archetypal cyborg figures, I guess. So he was writing a lot about him, and then I got quite into, his bodily articulation as well, and like, the sort of like correspondences between flesh and machine, and in a way also between this idea of bodybuilding. I mean, even as an idea divorced from like the gym, it's quite evocative, like about bodybuilding and like identity as well, and so that's kind of like, and Arnold really is a sort of like ground zero, I guess, of many of the things that I do, even though I might not necessarily kind of draw him into the circumference of things anymore, but yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of ideas here. Why would you not draw him into the circumference? What happened, do you think? Is it because of who he is as a person, or?
No, I think I've just moved onto other kind of thematic concerns. So I'm still interested in like that kind of construction or deconstruction of the human. But I'm like, I guess like, if Rocket States is about like weapons and like machines of war, then like the book about insects is obviously the concerns have shifted more towards like, I mean, in that particular instance, it's more about psychoanalysis and metaphors of the insectile, such as swarming or hatching. But that kind of concern about the deconstruction of the human is still very much at the sort of core of what I do, and so that's where I see Arnold still belonging, because his iteration and his appearance to me is always kind of cyborgic.
For sure. There's a wonderful album called Bodybuilding, came out in 2023 by an artist called Tom Rasmussen. I don't know if I've shared their work with you. So 2 of my queer clients introduced me to Rasmussen's work, and one of them has struggled with dysmorphia, and that's both of their body but also a sense of self and identity. And I think the album, the imagery of the album, even Rasmussen's presence on stage, a big burly looking person, beard, bit of a belly, in a tutu.
Oh, great.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's not allowed. And I think to be invited and to be brought in to the space and to just enjoy the tunes as well. I didn't feel unwelcome. I felt like I'd had my eyes opened a bit. And yeah, we all danced, which I think is massively important.
Yeah, it is. Oh my God, I'm going to check this out because I'm teaching a class on Love Lies Bleeding next term.
One of my favourite films in the past 2 years. Yeah.
So I think that would fit really well with that.
With Arnie, there are two ways I think that we can talk about transhumanism, and is it right to say that post-humanism is like a subsection of transhumanism, or would you see them as separate?
Yeah, I'd see them as totally separate.
Okay.
Like transhumanism is the sort of like uncritical like adoption of like technological devices for like augmenting or enhancing, I guess, like the body or the mind, and the post-human is that which is informed by theory and is critical of like concepts and myths such as the human.
Okay, so in the context of Arnold as a bodybuilder and maybe having access to new substances, you know, it wasn't maybe, I think, until the 40s, 50s that testosterone was synthesized so that people could increase muscle mass and add to the organic rates of growth, of hypertrophy of muscle tissue accumulation. So there were bodybuilders before that, of course there were, and huge bodybuilders, people who looked amazing. But I think it was from 40s, 50s onwards, people saw the particularly aesthetic changes that one could make to their bodies through applying substances, performance-enhancing drugs, however we want to see it. Love Lies Bleeding tackles that as well, where Katie O'Brien's character is determined to jump on steroids and to become a bodybuilder, and sees the acquisition of juice as necessary for her goal. So that's potentially one way to break through the bounds of being human, I would imagine. Is that fair to say as a criticism?
Yeah.
But then you've got the Terminator.
Yes.
And you have the cyborg, and so this is using technology to transcend the bounds of the organic. When you think of this construction, this idea, what do we get right? What do we get wrong? What do the art get right and wrong about it, maybe?
About like the transcending of boundaries, or I mean, like I think it's hard to generalize, because I think like if like a lot of the things are still invested in maintaining these kind of boundaries and keeping them kind of separate. But I think that every so often, like I do think that Love Lies Bleeding does a really great job. I mean, even in terms of its premise, it's interrogating, well, what gender is a bodybuilder, or like what is a somebody who passes as a woman, what are they meant to look like? Because I do think, like, obviously, like we were talking about Tom Rasmussen earlier, but like the way that Judith Butler talks about, like we are still punishing people for not doing their gender right, is one of the things that they write about in Gender Trouble. So I think that there's still like that kind of punishment that is dished out, and I think that we're not really moving into a kind of a space where all sorts of bodies and all sorts of lives are being fostered and valued.
It's an interesting point. There's another injection, of course, that society has gravitated towards that has the opposite effect. If we think about Mounjaro and Ozempic.
Yes.
We have the body positivity movement, particularly through lockdown. People can't move as much. People are probably overeating. People are getting bigger. And I don't know if you noticed this, but there seemed to be a tight correlation with people getting bigger and people being more accepting of different sized bodies. But when we understood that Ozempic was available and more people could access it, and so then we saw bodies shrinking down again, the smaller body became more attractive. And this will move in cycles, of course it will. Where being bigger has demonstrated wealth, and being slight has demonstrated fitness, and this expands and it contracts, and that's a natural cycle. But it's interesting that body positivity crumpled as Ozempic boomed. And so it's this thing, it's arguably, it's not necessarily transhuman, but it's something exogenous put into the human in order to create an ideal shape. I find that quite interesting. And we kind of allow Ozempic, but we might still deride the bodybuilders, Plenty of times you'll see on internet forums, oh, he's only big because he took steroids. She's only big because she took steroids. it's just they also probably put a lot of work in to get there, and a lot of people don't have the genetics. A lot of people don't have the mental capacity to deal with the changes, like Katie O'Brien's character points in Love Lies Bleeding.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of factors that go into a person being bigger than life, bigger than organic matter.
Yeah, that the film does that really well. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, no, you go on. I interrupted you.
Well, very literally, at the end of the film we see that, don't we?
Yeah.
And it's an amazing expression of joy and, yeah, being and becoming more than what maybe our society, our immediate environment would allow for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, you know, that people are still obviously classified as freaks or freakish. So yeah, I think, and like, just recently when you mentioned Ozempic, like, there's a lot of articles recently about plus size models and not being able to find work because of this drug, where the body positivity movement seems to have taken a back seat again, which, yeah. So, but then, like, I am like Freud, and I also don't believe in progress. So yeah, it's kind of like you were talking about. There's this constant back and forth and shifting of alignments, and I think there's always backlashes. Yeah, so there's a sort of constant fight for the rights of freaks. You know, and we can saying that from the position of a freak.
Go on.
Well, I mean, like, just in terms of like, that's where your alliance needs to lie. Like, as Wolverine says, I'm going to take my chance with the freaks.
We have been chatting a little bit about comic books and the X-Men as a grouping, as a series of stories, have come up a fair amount. And obviously with Logan as the namesake, what do the X-Men mean to you? Why are they important? And what could we take from them? What can we learn from them?
I mean, so just on a very kind of personal level, for me, the name Logan is associated with courage and integrity. So that's how I would want to go out into the world, because these are the associations that I make. But then, I mean, I guess I'm also drawn to this idea that, like, this is kind of floated throughout the X-Men films, is obviously that he's a survivor. But then my kind of take, I don't necessarily consider myself a survivor, but I'm certainly a mutant and a cyborg. So I think that I like that idea that he embodies, but he is obviously also a deeply traumatized subject, and like, I think the X-Men in generally, they're like traumatic bodies. They seem to be invulnerable, but like internally there's all sorts of turmoil raging. So I quite like, again, it's this kind of oxymoronic idea of like being like strength on the one hand, but also vulnerability on the other. So, and I think that it's always good to, I guess, be aware of and allow for both.
There's something perhaps to be said, isn't there, of strong bodies, courageous bodies, people who are extraordinary in some way, nearly always also attracting derision and being criticised for something. So the case that I could think of, Arnie is one of them, a strong body, but also once you got past the muscles, you'd see interviews with him where he was funny and he seemed to be quite kind and caring for particularly the people he was competing with. He might have played pranks on them, but he often wanted his fellow bodybuilders to do well.
Yeah.
But I think as a foreign body, a foreign strong body, he also intimidated people on a bigger scale. And he was stupid, he was an idiot, he couldn't possibly be smart, caring, and also have muscles.
Yeah. And I mean, and we're still talking about two white men who, like, still, like, Hugh Jackman at any rate, like, fits, the stereotypical idea of what a good-looking man, is meant to look like. But I mean, I also think about, like, this idea of, like, courageous bodies as bodies that don't fit into that kind of mold. divine, or like there's lots of actors that I can think of that I think of as like breaking the mold. Yeah. And like, so, I mean, the criticism, I guess, with the X-Men is that a lot of them do also pass in the end as like white people, like so Mystique, like underneath her gorgeous blue and scaly skin, as an attractive white woman, so that, and like, or Beast, who passes as a white man. So I think that there's still like eventually, like I wonder to what extent that kind of critique takes us, because I think if the norm remains whiteness, then it can't really accomplish that much.
No, this idea of the X-Men could be an interesting way to look at minority groups and marginalisation of peoples and values and ideals, but the narratives nearly always centre on white narratives.
Yeah.
And I think maybe until you have characters like Miles Morales, the modern Spider-Man, and the Latino African-American heritage that his character has, and those animated films, I think they came out through Sony.
Okay.
The first one is honestly one of my favourite animated films ever. It looks amazing, it sounds amazing, we see culture, we hear Spanish spoken with English, and we don't know all the time what's being said. Without subtitles, it would be foreign to us. But it's not to this family, and that's the point. That feels to me like meaningful representation.
Yeah.
Like an actual story that needs to be told and heard and seen. It needs to be seen to be believed. I saw it on a big screen. I was just blown away by it. I was absolutely in love with this telling, this take on Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't have to be a white man.
No, yeah.
No, Spider-Man stands for something.
Yeah.
Stands for being a local hero. That's what's amazing about that.
Yeah.
So 100% I can see that. And I was looking at the space race. Space race, interesting there. In that Man on the Moon, 1966. Yeah, but
69, I think. But
69.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the World Cup when.
Of course you are.
Of course I am.
The one time.
All right, so we got Man on the Moon, 1969. Thank you for that correction. We didn't have a black man in space until 1983, maybe. And the first American woman was 1983 in space. But the Soviets had women in space from 1963, which is interesting. So then it feels more like, if we're going to allow it, that the comrades sent up their comrades, that it was about people in space.
Yeah.
Whereas the investment from an American perspective was, again, white men.
Yeah.
Progressing, pushing the boundaries, being the explorers.
Whitey's on the moon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so reaction to that is obviously your Afrofuturism and Sunra and amazing.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't have necessarily had to have been a reaction. When we think about getting to space, I think for civilians at the time it might have felt like a jousting contest almost between two different ideologies, but ultimately we were trying to break free of the Earth's orbit, and how incredible is that? But I think more sinister side to it potentially is that it was a dick swinging contest. How big can you build it? How much thrust have you got? Who's going to get to the finish quicker? And that want to build the biggest missile obviously had a military aspect to it. And we were cheering for it. We wanted it to happen. And it ties back into this idea of the death drive, kind of chasing these things that will kill us ultimately. And I sometimes worry that with things like our LLMs and the way that we palm off our critical reasoning or our memory to hard drives and to robots, and asking for summaries rather than just reading the things ourselves, or looking at a map, to plan a route, that maybe the destruction's already happened, like the rocket that's already landed. We're not aware of the end, that it's already here.
Yeah.
And that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's wonderfully put.
Maybe when we think of apocalypse and these fallout narratives, it's almost like we are planning for a future where everything has changed and everything's different, but it's now.
Yeah.
And we're already degrading.
Yeah.
There's a TV series based on the games. Have you come across Fallout?
Yeah. I mean, I've never played it.
I've not played it either, but the series is really good. It's a 8-episode series, and I really enjoyed it. Walton Goggins
Oh yeah,
is particularly good as a ghoul.
he's great. He's made a return.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he is amazing.
And as one of the ghouls, who some of them prefer to be known as necrotic post-humans.
I love it.
How good's that?
Yeah, that is amazing.
He is on the surface, and he's looking for bounties and ways to justify his unlimited existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that he will live forever as a result of being ghoulified by radiation. And
Wow.
he is on the surface and he sees the world for what it is, and ironically makes a living where other people can't, literally in spaces that other people can't. Everybody else is hiding. And it's this bit of, we think that we want longer life, we think that we want to live forever, but actually if the quality of it severely degrades, you know, so that we can't remember things anymore, it doesn't matter that we're on our feet, it doesn't matter that we're still able to wheel around if we're not in control of ourselves.
Yeah.
We mentioned briefly Foucault and the idea of the body as political and notions of control and prisons. The panopticon is the perfect prison design in that you can see all of the inmates from one position. And we have willingly put cameras in our pockets and we tell the robots everything about us. And it feels to me that we have placed ourselves in a prison that looks like it doesn't have any cage. You know?
Yeah.
It's in our pockets.
Yeah.
We're manacled to this thing,
Yeah.
willingly so.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. It's like the age of surveillance capitalism. I guess there's like great works written about that that state of affairs. And there's something else that, like what you said, that resonated, but it's gone out of my head as well. So
I want to finish on this question because I think it's a fun one. If Freud were alive now, would he be more interested in the development of AI and LLMs or TikTok?
Well, I think definitely TikTok, because I guess like that is still about how subjects present themselves in particular ways, right? Whereas LLMs, I don't know. I don't think he'd be particularly interested in that.
No, not even talking to them as therapists.
No, I don't think so, because obviously he would like hardly argue for his own obsolescence.
Good point. All right, so we have spoken about Rocket States, your book on insects. Can you just remind us what that's called?
It's called The Insectile and the Deconstruction of the Non-Human.
Perfect. Where might people be able to scoop copies of this?
Well, you can download it for free.
Really?
Yes, from Routledge. So it's open access.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Which is rare in academia.
Yeah, I mean, so the library coughed up the money for it.
That's class.
Yeah.
Have you got other projects that you can announce? We know times on them.
I've got this manuscript called Case Study of a Partially Dead Object, which, you know, I want to see out in the world. It needs to be out in the world, I think, if only for my own sake.
And the title.
And the title, exactly. I think that's the main thing, but I'm working on various other more critical creative projects as well. So yeah, I announced the other day to Aggie that I'm now a writer, and she was like, "You've always been a writer."
I would say so. Yeah. I appreciate your time as an academic, a writer, and a mate, of course. Thanks
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.